Hello Beastly Besties. Sorry if I seem a little bit off today. Didn't do makeup or anything. I'm not feeling the greatest. And you will probably hear my guinea pig drinking out of her water bottle because I'm down here with her. Hey sweetie. Anyway, today for the podcast, I want to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome. So I know that is a subject that comes up a lot, and that's something that I personally struggle with, is kind of telling people what I do for a living and also feeling like I can say what I've done for a living. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but I struggle a lot with answering that question. So people will say, oh, what do you do for a living? When I say that I am self-employed, I work from home. And a lot of times I say I'm a seamstress or a costume designer, which is not really the case. I'm an artist. I make art for a living. My art just happens to be wearable, so it's easier to say that I make costumes, but then that always inevitably leads to the conversation of, can you make me a Halloween costume? Etc. And that's not really what I do, so it's kind of awkward. And while I do make costumes for myself, I wouldn't feel comfortable making costumes for others. And it just feels like a lot of the time I have this imposter syndrome going on where I don't feel like I'm worth the value to say that I'm an artist, or I feel like people are going to judge me because of that. And that's just one of the struggles that I personally have as like a full-time working artist, is being able to almost justify saying, what I do for a living. And there's other parts, like imposter syndrome to me, and again, this may not be like a textbook definition, but a lot of times imposter syndrome to me is that feeling that you haven't made it, even though you're working and you're doing the thing, but you feel like you haven't made it as like a full-time artist or whatever your career is. You feel like you're an imposter and you're just pretending to be that. So for me, I feel a lot of times like I feel like an imposter when I say that I'm a full-time artist, because yes, I work full-time, but I'm not fully supporting myself, and I feel like I always have this like little self-doubt going on that even though art pays all of my bills, I have a significant other and he pays for the rent and I pay the utilities and things like that. So I feel like I'm almost an imposter because I'm not paying my rent with art. And, I'm not, this famous artist who can kick back and go on trips and go overseas and things like that, but it works for me. And that's kind of like the weird thing that happens, I feel like, when you're a full-time artist or you're in your career, and this imposter syndrome just kind of sneaks up on you, where you keep telling yourself, it's that self-doubt that you're not making it in your career because of some external force kind of telling you otherwise. And, that's something I struggle with a lot, and ways that I try to like work around that is a lot of the times I remind myself that this is what I do for a living. It does pay my bills, and if I was such an imposter, I wouldn't be able to do this full time. And I do have that self-doubt still, where I'm also like, well, I mean, really, what would your life be like if you didn't do this full time? Would you have a better life? Would you have a better career? Things like that. And it's just like that imposter syndrome telling me that being a full-time artist isn't viable, or that since I'm not, in New York with a fabulous career traveling overseas, that I'm not a full-time artist. Where the thing is, like, a lot of times when you're making a living from art, or you're doing like art or being an artist, you're not going to be fabulously wealthy, things like that. You're going to be happy and you're going to be making your career and you're going to be working hard, but you're not going to necessarily be this person that, gets to travel overseas and go on fabulous trips and things like that. You're going to be working. I mean, you're going to be kind of like nose to the grindstone, getting it done kind of person. So that's just, some of the ways that this kind of self-doubt like manifests in myself. And then another thing is, like, I feel sometimes that people like follow me, but they don't necessarily like me or like my artwork. And, you kind of get caught, like I talked about before, where you're in that social media cycle where you're like kind of living by the likes, and you want that adrenaline rush of getting all of the likes and things like that. And then that imposter syndrome hits you when, the algorithm changes and you don't get all of the likes and you don't get all of that attention. then you feel like you were just kind of faking it while people were liking you, when in all reality, the algorithm has just changed and people aren't seeing your work as much. And it's really hard to put your self-worth into how many likes that you get, but it feels like the imposter syndrome is almost triggered by, changes in how many likes you get and things like that. So that's just like something that I personally struggle with, and I know others do too. Like, the whole point of this podcast is, or even these chats, I guess this isn't a podcast anymore because I'm kind of just like talking to you guys, but I guess the whole point of that is to just kind of normalize that we all feel this way and that we all kind of have the same struggles, either when we're starting out or if we are a full-time artist. We all kind of have these same struggles that, we have to get over, like the self-doubt and the outside influence, because that's another thing that I personally did not have to deal with a lot, because when I turned 13, so I was in middle school. I guess I was probably actually 12 years old. I was in middle school in 8th grade, and I went to my parents. I went to my mom, and I was like, hey, I'm going to apply for this art school, and I'm going to go to art school for high school. And this was totally out of the blue to her, because I don't think she realized how much I was into art at the time. And personally, like, that's a weird decision for me too, because I'm not actually sure what led me to apply for this art school. Sorry, my guinea pigs are running again. I don't know what actually made me apply to this art school at first. I really was kind of on a whim, but I just decided at like 12 or 13 that I was going to be a professional artist. And I didn't know what that was going to entail, because at first I thought I was going to be like a photographer or a painter, and I don't do either of those things really. So it was just like a weird decision that I made, but I decided at like 12 or 13, I went to my parents, I said I'm going to art school. And they went along with it completely, I think because they were kind of happy that I wasn't going to be going to the local high school, because the local high school had some issues. And I was also at the time kind of running with a bad crowd, and I was starting to get into like just being in a bad place. So they were kind of happy for me that I was going to be getting away from those people or those bad influences, and that I was going to be going to the School of the Arts. And, from there, it took them a little bit. So in the 4 years that I was there, they were really, really supportive of me being an artist. And I never really heard of like, oh, well, is this going to be a viable career or things like that, which I know others have to deal with, that I really didn't have to deal with as much. But when I went to go to college and I still wanted to do art, my mom didn't really express any concern at first. And my dad never expressed any concerns, but a lot of times my dad wouldn't talk to me directly. A lot of times, like, I know that he would like kind of tell his doubts to my mother, and then she would come to me with his doubts. So he never said anything directly, but I knew both of them were having a little bit of doubts about me going to art school for college and making art my career, because at first, when it's in high school, you can still change your mind, and, that may not influence or impact the rest of that. So to them, they weren't as concerned, but then when I wanted to do it for college, they started to get a little more concerned because it was going to be my career. Then I took my mom to this talk, because I was like, you know what, I do want to do this, and I understand I'm paying for my own college, so there's really no way that you can tell me not to go to art school, but I do want your support. So what I did is I took my mother to this talk, and, during the talk, a lady came up on the stage, and she kind of looked like a very artsy Morticia Addams. I just remember this, like, she looked like Morticia, but she was like very artsy, and she was like very like well-spoken. And so we sit down, and she starts talking to all of the parents who kind of had concerns about art school. And she was explaining to them that like everything you interact with during your daily life, the ads you see, the chair you sit on, the packaging from the food that you open or things like that, it's all created by an artist. So artists are needed in a modern daily life. And that was kind of the turning point. And I know she told me in confidence a couple years later that was the turning point for her of when she thought that, art could be a viable career. But where that kind of goes back to what I was talking about with the imposter syndrome is I too was feeling that way. Like, I too feel sometimes that when I say I'm a full-time artist, I'm faking it. And it's not true, it's what I do full-time, but you still have that imposter syndrome because there is a lot of doubt about the viability of an art career. So yeah, that was kind of a major turning point for me. And I know these video vlogs kind of get rambly, but it's one of those things that you're never going to get away from it. And I know a lot of time with the imposter syndrome, for me, it's self-doubt. I know for others it can be influenced because that doubt is created by outside influence from like your family members or things like that who are saying, you know, is this really a viable career? You're not there yet. You're not a full-time artist yet, or you're not making millions of dollars. So is this viable, you know? And a lot of times you just need to take the time to get there. And there is something true to be said about the fake it till you make it, where sometimes you do almost have to fake it. Like, you have to think of yourself and put yourself in that headspace that I'm an artist first, so that you can get to the place that you want to be with your career. And because you have to make those decisions. Like I'd said in my other podcasts up to now, the ones that we're just talking, what I said in my other podcasts up to now was that you have to make conscious decisions if you want to do this full time, because at some point you're going to have to prioritize your art over your career, whatever that may be. For me, it was retail, so I mean, I don't really think of it as a career because I never wanted it to be a career, and it is a viable career for some people. Like, some people, retail is their career, but for me, I didn't want to be in that retail sphere any longer than I had to be, because it was so emotionally draining for me being in retail. And I'll tell you some retail experiences at another video and some of the things that kind of led me to get out of retail. But I had to make those decisions that were not comfortable to leave retail and become a full-time artist. And in a way, I was faking it because I wasn't at that point to be a full-time artist, but I know I had to push myself or I would never get to that point. And so it can feed into that imposter syndrome, though, because you're like, well, I made this decision, and I know that I wasn't making this decision because of any good reason at the time, or I had my reasons, but I was making this decision and I was kind of lying to myself and lying to everyone around me, saying I'm going to be this full-time artist and I'm ready to make this step, and I'm not ready, but I told myself I was. So that's kind of my my thoughts on imposter syndrome, and I would love to see you guys, if you have any comments or you guys have any more that you want to share on this topic, because I'm still kind of like forming my opinion around it. If you could leave a comment below about how you've either been affected by imposter syndrome or what imposter syndrome really means to you, I would love to hear from you guys, because I would like to do a kind of a follow-up for this in a couple of months where maybe I have a little more thoughts on the subject and I can share more with you guys. I also want to apologize for the lighting right now. It's Halloween season for me, and that's my busiest time of year. So where I normally film my videos is absolutely packed with just like stuff for orders or like my light booth and everything. So my current workspace that I usually film videos in is absolutely packed. So I had to like shoot this video sitting here with my guinea pigs by my front window. So I know the lighting is probably absolutely terrible and the sound's probably a little off, but I'm trying to do, you guys requested to have these done with videos, so I'm trying to help you guys. Well, not help you guys, I'm trying to help you help me, I guess. I'm trying to, you know, go with your requests on this. So I'm sorry for the lighting on this video, or if the sound's a little bit off. I will try to improve that in the future for more videos where I won't have to shoot in front of my window in this tiny space. And I really hope that this subject was kind of helpful, or this little bit of a conversation was helpful for you guys. If you enjoyed this, please give me a like on this video. Answer that question. I'd love to know what imposter syndrome means to you. And please subscribe so I can do more videos like this in the future. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining me once again. Bye, guys.